This is the new DR-Z4SM. This is the SM version. And what I want to do in this video is just kind of look at it closely, kind of get in there and pull some of these panels off, see what they've changed about it, what's new, what we like, what we don't like, and just kind of be judgmental about it. And you'll get the perspective of me, certified motorcycle mechanic, a YouTuber, so he's very full of himself, and a former DR-Z owner. I had an old 2001 DR-Z that I got with just under 10,000 miles, and I took it all up to about 50,000 miles, converted it to supermoto, modified it, flat slide pumper carb, E-cams, you know, but I did a lot to it. I was detailing that thing for a while, and I've also had a number of friends through the years who've owned DR-Zs, customers when I was just a mechanic wrenching on stuff that I've worked on DR-Zs. I think the old DR-Z I know better than any other bike. I can hear one running, and I'm like, oh, that's a DR-Z. Especially the old starter clutch sound when you turn them off. Like, if you know, you know. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so what we're gonna be doing in this video is nitpicking. We're gonna be harsh at times about this bike. I don't want you to get the wrong idea though. This is still a super cool bike. It's a supermoto. It does supermoto things. We just had it at the supermoto track. Actually really good. It performed better than anyone thought it was, including our buddy Dewey, who brought one of his 470 big bore stroker DR-Zs, and this may have been quicker. That's gonna be a fun video. So I don't want you to get the wrong idea from it. I would take one of these bikes. And that leads me to another point. This is not my motorcycle. This is a giveaway motorcycle. It's being given away thanks to fanofthem.com. You can go over to fanofthem.com/JakeTGS, and you can purchase some exclusive merch that'll put you into the drawing to win this thing. Giveaway in September, I believe 21st. You don't have to worry about it being overpriced. You can just win it. And win or lose, you're helping support Fan of Them, a veteran-owned company, and myself. No pressure either way. Enjoy the DR-Z content that we'll be making over the next few weeks with this thing. So at a quick glance, if you've been aware of the old DR-Z, this still is the same sort of geometry design. They technically have a new frame. We'll talk about that more in a second. This is probably more old DR-Z than new DR-Z, but there is surprising a lot of stuff that's been tweaked and modified. It's kind of neat to see KYB suspension on it. I don't think, you know, Suzuki's selling it as KYB is better than Showa, and it's kind of whatever. Like this isn't the top level KYB, and the show is on the old bike, but not the top levels. The immediate thing, though, I think you notice, you see the new bike is the body work, and let's take a closer look at that. Now, this is the supermoto model, so we have, I believe, a little bit different fender than the S, although it's still pretty big, and I don't really mind that either. I think a lot of bikes, like the Sherco over here, it's got a fairly small supermoto fender on it. Kind of looks almost more like an aftermarket one you'd get, and you know, they just don't do as good. This actually, I was riding this thing in the rain the other day. It's why it's actually all wet right now. Forgive me, I just gave it a quick half once over clean job just so it wasn't filthy, but I literally was riding it in the rain and went down a dirt road, so this thing was just covered. But this fender did a wonderful job of protecting me. It's not a bad shape. I think what's kind of interesting too about this bike, I've noticed compared to the old DR-Z, is how flexy these plastics are. I mean, they are, compared to my Sherco over here, which is what you might call a real enduro supermoto bike. Those are way stiffer. These are actually much more flexy, and that's a good thing. You kind of want these to be flexible. Yeah, it kind of means they kind of bounce and vibrate. I mean, whatever. That just means it's much less likely you're going to break them when you fall over. Like, for instance, that supermoto, when it went down in the dirt, it creased that front fender. It did get folded over really hard, but it kind of like rolled it up into it. I've heat gunned it a bit, but it's got a stress mark on it now. I think this would hold up a lot better. Single headlight is interesting. This is sort of subjective, but I will say, having ridden with it at night, it's not a bad headlight. It does the job great. I almost kind of think they should have done two lights in here. One of the things they've changed too is these fork guards. One thing I kind of like is they got rid of that guide. The old DR-Z had this, on the inverted forks on the SMs, had like this plastic guide that kind of locked into the fork guard here. It was supposed to help them work together, but they just seem to be problematic. They would always end up popped out and chewed up, and it was kind of a messy setup. And this is just more of a traditional, it's got 3 bolts, pops on and off. In fact, I was looking before, this may be the same bolt pattern as my Sherco over there. In fact, a lot of this lower fork stuff looks similar. It's not exactly the same. What could be interesting though about that, if you did want to change them to like something like the Sherco has over there, is that, well, this has that that sort of reflector sort of built into it. I don't know how easily this could be removed. I don't feel any hardware here on the back. This may just be stuck on. Ooh, I think it might be. I haven't tried removing this. Maybe you could just pop them off. They may just be glued on. The bolt pattern is not quite the same, but it does show you how that white fork guard on there looks way better. Yeah, those black ones are lame. They need to go to those. One of the other things though you will notice on this side of the bike versus the old DR-Z is the absence of a Speedo drive cable, that obnoxious thing. And I'm glad to see that gone, because I blew through a bunch of those on my old DR-Z, especially if you pull them up, you do a long wheelie and the front wheel stops and you put it down and it jumps the speed, it snaps that cable. We're no longer running it that way. Instead, we're running off the ABS, which we'll talk more about in a minute. Let's stick to the bodywork though for now. What do you guys think of the shape of this bodywork? I know it's kind of a subjective thing. I don't think it's particularly bad looking here on the sides. The only thing actually on this whole bike I'm not a huge fan of is the front headlight, and it's growing on me. I mean, it's not terrible, and I think because it's functionally good, I'm not furious with it. This is kind of an interesting shape. But let me show you something here that I don't like. Now, the subframe on this bike, which I know we're jumping ahead here, but hear me out, comes like all the way up to about here somewhere. And that makes sense for a dual sport. You want to be able to put things up here and rest things. One thing I think it's real important to do though is to make sure you have a good place to grab right here. You know, this plastic right here is fairly flexy, as you can see. So you're not intended to pick it up by that. You know, on some lighter enduro bikes like that Sherco, you actually do pick it up by the rear plastic. It's very thick through there. But this is heavier and the subframe goes through here, so you just simply grab it by the subframe. The problem is it's not really particularly great to grab onto. It's just a thin little rail in here. It'd be nice if they put something more substantial to grab onto, and they honestly could have done that with just a simple plastic insert. The other problem too with that is you see right here, when you do grab it, your hand kind of flexes this plastic a bit. I've moved it a couple times now, and this plastic is flexible enough, it's not a problem, it's just uncomfortable. Again, both of these problems could be fixed with some sort of molded plastic piece along the frame right here, especially if you put some nice finger grooves in it, and then again, you would have something similar to what you see on the Sherco. And honestly, I'm kind of wondering if somebody in the 3D print world will come up with something like that for this bike. It's an easy fix. Something I find kind of annoying. While you're down here, let me tell you about something I do like back here, is that you're seeing kind of a traditional style dirt bike rear fender setup, where the plastic tail light here on the back and all this assembly, which is a bit much, could easily be removed. It's just unbolt. You could unbolt it here, put something else on, and by unbolting and taking it off, we're not messing up sort of like the underside of this fender. This fender still goes down, tucks back in here to the air box like you'd expect. And if anybody remembers my 300L, where we had to basically rebuild all this out of a trash can just because we wanted to replace the tail light, that was insane. Here, tail light changes are going to be extremely easy. I think there's probably going to be plenty of aftermarket kits out there. And even if you don't, this brake light's actually kind of good looking on this bike. Plenty bright. They got rid of that horrible square. If you're clever, you could probably get in here with a Dremel and kind of cut some of this out, remove this, and maybe build you some little L brackets and put your plate right off of there. I could see a potential to do that very easily. And I know we're kind of jumping into the lights here, but since we already talked about the front, I will show you, you know, these turn signals are kind of large, but they are a nice LED and they're very bright. I still imagine though a lot of people will probably end up replacing those. Oh yeah, we have hazards on this bike. Hazards! It's probably not even going to break down. It's funny. Now, you finally get hazards on this thing and fuel injected and modernized. It's not going to break down on you. All right, so now I got you up high because I do want to show you something that annoys the hell out of me about the back of the bike. Again, these plastics aren't bad looking, and the exhaust side one sticks out a little further than the non-exhaust side, and that's pretty normal on a motorcycle. And so the shapes of these are slightly different. I think some slight effort could have been made to make these look more symmetrical, even with this one sticking out further. This has kind of a rounded edge, where this is kind of more of a triangled edge, and that always looks silly to me. I notice it, but again, you're not going to notice that as much. The other thing that's kind of interesting is this black panel that sticks out from here on this side. Now, this is the big battery box over here and some other things. We're going to take it off in a minute. So you're not gonna be able to like remove this plastic here. This might as well just be all one piece, but they've separated them, whatever. It doesn't look bad. And I like the fact that they did make the exhaust shield on their side kind of match this, but you see the problem here? They don't match. It's like they're close, but they're not quite the same. And I'm not sure why we just didn't take the extra effort to make these two things match each other. It seems like it would have been really easy to do. And again, you're never going to notice this. You're going to either be on this side of the bike, you're going to be on that side of the bike. You're looking at it right now at an angle that most people aren't going to look at it much, and It doesn't really matter. It could have really easily been made a little more symmetrical. Speaking of this exhaust heat shield, you're not gonna wanna remove this thing. I did notice there's already a Yosh exhaust out for this thing, and it does keep this heat shield. I would tell you, be worrisome of those exhaust systems that don't retain this heat shield. And the reason why is, first of all, this plastic right here, this very flimsy plastic, doesn't have any heat shielding on it. I suppose you could add it. Some kits will come with that. It's just not there, and I think it's so flexy. I think you're just asking for problems. Also, for any who, with S models or even SM models that want to put luggage on the back, something hangs over this. This is a pretty substantial unit. I think it's going to do a decent job of protecting your luggage, and it's also to some degree going to help protect the pipe in a crash. It kind of hangs out down here a little bit, and because it's almost symmetrical to the other side, it won't look bad. But if you take this off and you have the black piece on the other side, that's really going to look out of whack. I know they're not perfect, but they're better than they are now. So yeah, I think you're gonna wanna keep this on here. Another thing you may not have noticed is that this bike is running sort of plastic guard thing around the tank. The plastic that they're using around this tank, as well as a few other places on this bike, like these black panels down here, these show scratches incredibly easy. This bike right now has 503 miles on it. So many little scratches on these black parts right now. And not only does this panel scratch very easily, it also makes no sense at all. Let me show you this thing if you haven't seen this already. This little rubber guy on here, a rubber cover for a keyhole. A keyhole? A key. Your ignition key goes in here. Why? Well, because there's some sort of cover in here. And if you remember, the old DR-Z always had this goofy looking pouch back here, held some tools, the manual, and whatever you wanted, and most people removed them. So I was kind of hoping when I saw this that, hey, maybe that's what that is. Let's see what this is. Well, it's this. What is this? This had some tools in it. One of those little crappy screwdrivers and some other piece. I took them out because they were rattling. You can actually see where they're leaving marks in here, and they're just like the most garbage tools in the world. Why did we even make this lockable? Why didn't we maybe take a little bit of extra time and try to make this some sort of storage panel? This is silly to me, and it took effort to make this and cost money. You're paying for it when you buy one of these, and this panel is so goofy to me. I can already tell you right now, I almost guarantee you're gonna see these DR-Zs in the future with this little flap missing and this keyhole just open on it, because this is gonna wear out and fall off. I wanna show you something. Even if you were like, oh, maybe I can stick something in here. I wanna show you something kind of funny here. Okay, it's back on right now. It's locked. What's the point of this? What's the point of this panel if I can do that? This panel makes no sense to me. Also, you have to pull this off to get to this bolt. If this is my bike, I'm gonna tell you right now what I probably would end up doing. That bolt sits about right here. I would probably drill a small hole right here where this bolt sits, and I might even just slightly, put a dab of glue on these corners just to make sure this thing stays in place. If we're gonna do something here with a little panel like this, why not put like on some little hinge with a Zeus fastener and give me airbox access? This is a dirt bike, and the air filter, in my opinion, should be fast to get to and a toolless operation. Again, I'm gonna point out to you that the Sherco over there, which, yes, it's kind of a race machine, but look how easy this air filter is to get to. This is what I'd like to see. And I know we're kind of skipping ahead of the plastics here, but let me show you what it's like to get to the air filter on this. Definitely not toolless. We gotta have to bust out an 8mm. I can tell you too, I've already removed all these, and whoever put them on at the factory used like 100 foot-pounds of torque on these things. I cannot believe they weren't stripped. They were so incredibly tight. Pop those off, and then you're gonna have two little guys here. You gotta kind of pop those off where you have some of those little rubber nipple guys that pop into here, and you're looking at this. This is Brody. Have y'all seen Brody? Come here, buddy. Yeah, she's Brody. Quick side quest. Yes, this is where your batteries house and some other electronics. This is where it was on the old DR-Z. One thing that is kind of goofy to me is the fuses are right here in this little box, and it's not even like it's got like a little hingy box on it, but look, you can't open it. And what I figured out you have to do is you have to kind of get this cable out of the way, and you have to just kind of wedge this whole box out like this, and then you can open it. And that's, and I know that because I've got the number, I believe there's a 15 right now pulled. That was the ABS. That's the one to pull if you want to disable the ABS. The SM models, you can only disable the ABS to the rear, not the front, which means like no stoppies. So yeah, but look at like that to me feels so, like why is it so, this feels junky to have to do it this way. And if you guys want, I'm thinking about adding a switch to this bike just to be able to disable it and re-able it. I can make a video on that if you're interested. But yeah, you have other little connectors here and things, but it's definitely busier than the old DR-Z with all of this stuff going on. You know, this bike is maybe about, I think on paper, 15 or 20 pounds heavier than the old DR-Z. You can kind of see, you know, and you see substantial plastics and bits and whatnot. Definitely seems plausible. Let's get to the air box. Now we have to use a Phillips. Again, you're at this point, why not at least make this one a Zeus fastener? I don't know. But they did give us a hinge, and there it is. Like this is, why is this so thick too? This is just, there's just some things you see engineered certain ways. You think, though, that probably made it heavier and more expensive. Like this seems oddly substantial for what it is. But you have a simple pop in and out foam filter. They did go with a foam filter, and as annoyed as I am with this is still better than my 300L, but it's worse than the old DR-Z where we would have just had 3 Zeus fasteners, popped it off, and a bigger, more domey sort of filter. It's not a bad size filter. They got the big snorkel right here, which I think tuners have already been pulling off. Like the old DR-Z, it's got one of the little one-way valves down here. One of the tuners out there I saw actually pulls this door off. If I were to pull this door off, I don't love how we now have kind of like an axis from the rear tire kind of right up into here. I would probably, out of a piece of trash can, probably build some kind of shield that would kind of pop in here. There's a bolt or two I could see for the air box. We could drill a hole and axe it. We could kind of slot ours in there, but I would make like a little sort of gutter that sits in here just to kind of block water off the rear tire, and then trim it to sort of match up against the plastic that sits right here. Maybe even put if I really want get real fancy with it, we could put a piece of rubber across it from a slit hose, kind of make a gasket. Doesn't need to be super watertight, but just to keep the big stuff from coming up in there. Also, if you do remove this door, you go that level, keep in mind that this has a gasket on it, so it is waterproof up to the really high, up to, you know, about here where the snorkel is. So you take this off, you're lowering it by, you know, 6 inches or so. That's still extremely high to get water that high up on the bike. And I do like that they actually have a metal insert here. Like if we are gonna have a screw that holds this in, which I don't love, at least it's a proper machine screw, unlike the 300L where you had to remove, I think, 6 sort of sheet metal style screws to get into the air box. And you know, those have a finite amount of times that you can undo them and redo them before they start to strip. Now let's remove the other panel, and one of the things you'll see here, we have, again, one of these little black covers which shows scratches really easy, and it's right where your leg's gonna constantly drag against it, and you have to remove one of these little plastic push pins in order to pop this off. Again, I own this bike, I'm drilling a small hole right here where this bolt is, and just maybe a couple little tabs of glue, and I'm just gonna make this a part of it. It's so, I don't see the purpose in making that where it's separate. You can see our exhaust heat shield here. Compared to the old DR-Z, not that much is different. I mean, we see some stuff going on here that's EFI related. There's some different sensors. There's some weird throttle cables right here. I'm gonna get to that in a minute. You can already go ahead and pop the seat off, and we'll look up there in just a moment. By the way, the first time you go to pop the seat off, there's a bolt hole here, and on the other side, actually I think it uses these ones, and that's where the strap that goes across the seat sits. Normally those straps bolt to the seat itself, so if you want to keep that strap on, you just, you know, keep it on. But in case of this bike, it requires you to pull the seat off. Means you have to pull both plastics off so you can get to that bolt. I went ahead and removed it. I think by law they have to run those straps, but some people like them, and I really wish that they just incorporated some way to bolt it to the seat like every other bike on the market. It's not a bad seat. It's better than the old one. It's definitely wider than the old seat, and that is fairly comfortable. Yesterday I was filming with this bike and probably spent a total of about maybe 3 hours on the seat. There's still room for improvement. We'll remove these radiator shrouds next. And I've not removed these yet, and they are, okay, you're gonna have to remove this as a whole unit. Remove this, and this is one of those caps that you have a keyhole for, and then the whole thing, you're just gonna have to set this on top of the pump over here. Oh, yep, okay. That's not my favorite way to do that. There's some screws up in here, so you have to remove the screws, pop this down, then you could separate this, but as it sits right now, this is all one unit, and this alone would make me, along with the, I know how heavy these stamped gas tanks can be. I'd be definitely looking to change this out as soon as I could for a aftermarket tank, even if I didn't care about the range. And I can tell you the range on it's about 109 miles or so. Any aftermarket setup's probably going to change this, make it where these panels bolt straight to their tank, and this cover is going to go away. Let's see what it takes to get this fuel tank off. Obviously, the old DR-Z, this was fairly simple. It's carbureted. Here, we're going to have to disconnect a fuel pump, and hopefully that won't be a terrible pain in the ass. Yep, and it's got a hinge up front. The real question is, can we hinge this up enough to get to the bits we need to get to? That's not bad. And I like to stick a rubber mallet or a dead blow in here when I do this. So there should be minimum 2 things we have to remove in here. One of them would be this connector right here, which should be my power my fuel pump and the meter. And then we have should be a quick disconnect fuel line here. There we go, look at that. A little bit of fuel dribbles out. We have to grab a 10 mil on one side, and then what's this? This is a number 6 Allen, I believe. All right, now the bolt's out. Let's see, can I just remove this? What else is holding this on? Nothing, okay, that's not so bad. Our fuel tank is still quite full right now, and it's weighty. It's these steel stamp tanks are heavier than you think. I know with my old 300L, for instance, we switched to a half-gallon bigger plastic tank, and even with that extra gallon of fuel, the entire thing was lighter just because of how these things are heavy. And you see here we got our central fuel pump right here. And this is the whole reason the frame changed, because they didn't want to hang a fuel pump off to one side. And the old frame, that wouldn't have been possible. This is a cheap stamped fuel tank, and that's why they developed the plastic cover. It was cheaper to make a ugly tank and put a plastic cover on it than develop, let's be honest, the old DR-Z with its metal tank is a nice looking tank. And this is the route they went. When you get fuel with this thing, it has quite an interesting filler neck in here, the sort of filler piece. And you basically, there's a bottom out in there because there's a bar. You're gonna shove the pump all the way down into it and it clicks, but you can raise it and get almost a quarter more gallon of fuel in this top half if you kind of pull it up a little bit, but it's so hard to do that without making it spray. This is why, honestly, I think just having an open tank, kind of like the Sherco does here, where you can just see it, is better. But these big OEMs like this, I think they're forced to do this sort of stuff. Another reason I think an aftermarket tank for this bike would be a good buy. I've spilled gas on my shirt. Now that we have the bodywork pulled off, let's kind of like start looking more deep into the bike. And let's start here with the wheel. Front wheel on this bike is the normal 17. This is a 120/70/17. We've got this nice blue rim here. And the wheel itself looks super similar to the old DR-Z wheel. Obviously, the hub's a little different because it doesn't have that speed of drive hub now. And it's meant to made up to a KYB instead of a Showa. But I mean, man, this all looks very similar. The brakes, from what I can tell, look to be the exact same brakes the old DR-Z held, which I believe that would make this rotor, what, a 310? Instead of, they tend to run that instead of the 320, so you can pull the caliper off to take the front wheel off. You have a 320, which is kind of the more standard supermoto size. Sometimes you have to do weird trick stuff to get the front wheel on and off. But I do imagine that these triples are probably different on this one versus the S, or they just running these also on the S. And the reason why I say those are probably a little different is, see, we actually have space here. This is one of the things you get with a factory supermoto, is you get good spacing here between the wheel and the forks. On a inverted bike, you tend to have some clearance issues sometimes, particularly it seems like on the left fork, but not a problem here. We'll talk about the tire in just a second. In fact, let's go look at the rear, where we have this 4 1/4 rim, also blue. The brake, again, looks extremely similar. But one thing you are seeing that's a little bit different here is this tire. This bike came with one of these, a Dunlop Sportmax Q5A. It's just not quite grippy enough, in my opinion, for a supermoto. I'm sure it's not a bad bike. Maybe it's kind of more of a sport touring tire. I don't know. But the big problem here is this is a 140. And this is a 4 1/4 inch rim. So the profile on this just wasn't super great. We actually changed this out before we went to the track for a set of these Michelin Power 6s. I love these tires. I ran them on my old CRF 300L. And this has kind of become my new favorite supermoto tire just because of the dual compound. Probably one of the better tires you can get in a 150. But that's the other issue, is that tire is a 140, this is a 150. And so not only is that not very grippy, but you could run it out of room. We were playing around in parking lots, just driving this thing around on the stock tires and just leaning it over in a parking lot, which is not near as hard as you're gonna lean at the track. The rear would step out, you just run out of profile. Now, going bigger is not always the way to go. You know, people want to shove the biggest, widest tire they can on things and think that's going to give me more grip. Usually it doesn't. It causes weird bubbling and there's cylinders. But on a 4 1/4 inch rim, a 150 60/17 will give you a really, really good profile. That thing was a 140 70/17, and it's just a weird profile, and the tire edge runs out. So these are awesome. And again, whoever gets this bike is going to get these set of really good tires with it. Big shout out to Revzilla. Hey, good thing I got fuel on the shirt because they actually sent me this. I told them I would let everyone know that they have these on a good deal right now. Be sure to go over there, check them out, use the link. If you could use my link. But seriously, I think this is one of the first things you should do this DR-Z is put a proper set of tires on here. They still fit in here pretty good because there's actually really good room on this new swing arm. And this is something I haven't really heard Suzuki bring up. This is a completely different swing arm than the old DR-Z. A lot of the stuff is still in the same spots. I mean, honestly, even this looks like the old chain guard. We have the really nice chain guide here with the block in it. I don't know if the S's are getting these, but the SMs are getting these, and that's really cool because that keeps the chain from getting into the tire. But this swing arm is different. This is some of those sort of cast swing arms. The whole thing's sort of cast and hollow. A lot of things are going to these now. My old 300L had it. The Snorkel has it, and that thing's like all hardcore performance-y. So there's something about this. When you look at how much room this has, it almost seems a little bit of shame that they didn't go with a 5-inch rim. That would allow us to run a 160 on the rear. Going to a 160 doesn't automatically mean better contact patch or anything like that. It's really that if we could run a 160, the number of tires you can run gets much bigger. While we're back here, let me complain about the kickstand here. One, we've got our kickstand sensor switch right here, and this seems awfully exposed to me. And if this was my bike, I'd be removing this anyway. You typically just pin the two wires together. I haven't tested on this one yet, but you pin them together and it assumes the kickstand is always up. If you do something like that though, remember, you can put it in gear with the kickstand down, so, you know, keep that in mind. But I will say, I've jumped this bike several times now, and I haven't noticed it doing the thing that the old DR-Z did a lot of, which is when you go up a jump or land on a jump, this thing would pop a little bit, and that would kill the engine. It would kill the engine at the most horrible time, too, as you're coming up the jump and you want to stay a little bit on the throttle, and this thing would whack the ground as the suspension compressed, and you get this dive. But this one I haven't noticed doing that, and I think it's just because it does have a pretty good spring, and I was playing with it. It doesn't turn off the engine until it gets way down, like almost at the end of the sensor here. So I think that's okay. But what I was going to complain about is just how much this thing sticks out. It's way out here. It's the widest thing, and I feel like all dual sports do this. They do that, or they really just kind of stick them along here. And if you compare it to something like the Snorkel and a lot of enduro bikes, that kickstand really gets up out of the way. It's tucked up into the bike when it's up, and I love that. And I wish we could see stuff like that with these dual sports, you know? I don't even mind that it's steel and whatever, and the bottom's gonna rust because it's gonna move across the concrete and scratch. I do appreciate how significant and strong these are, where something like my Snorkel has an aluminum one, and sometimes it's sitting in the drive when you turn the wheels and the thing goes bam, and it pops the kickstand over a little bit, and you think, oh, is that okay? Where when this does it, I think, is my concrete okay? I'm not worried about this thing. For those of you who owned an old DR-Z, you noticed this part of the frame and around the cradling of the motor looks very similar to the old DR-Z. One thing I was going to point out to you is I don't know if this is even powder coat or if it's paint. This is going to be a bad deal. The old DR-Zs, I know some people had issues with their powder coat, but the one I had and many of the ones I worked on, the powder coat on them just seemed good and chunky, like it is on that Snorkel over there. This reminds me of the same kind of coating that's on my MT-07, which scratches very easy. And I don't know, the industry keeps going to this, they cheaping out on these coatings. And again, I almost think it's a pain, especially since this is where your boot's gonna sit. I'm surprised I didn't scratch it up at the track. I would be very quickly, if you owned one of these, looking for a set of covers. I'm sure somebody will come up with some. If nothing else, put some protective film tape over this. This is gonna scratch easy, and this is a steel frame, so it's going to rust. I also did take the inserts out of the pegs. I think these are the old style pegs, and you can already see too how shiny the top of this peg is, just from the boot wear. Now that we're kind of under the hood here, things are a little different if you were used to the old DR-Z. The first thing I noticed, just a lot more visible electronics all over the bike. This was done to accommodate having a sort of central fuel pump, where the old DR-Z had a bar that just kind of came straight down like this. So things are a little bit different because of that. There's some things that are going to be in a little bit different spots. Your oil filler cap is now right here in the center, but where before it was kind of off to the side. And it's this sort of plastic one. We did film an oil change video on this. I'll be putting that up soon. One of the new additions here is this giant ABS module now. Love it or hate it, all the DR-Zs, I believe, have them, at least here in the States. All the brake lines have to filter up to this thing. I will say I've played with this thing, actually hammered on these brakes. The ABS in a straight line does work well, but of course, for those of us, especially Supermoto, it's kind of annoying to have the fun police, and for some reason on the Supermoto model, you can only disable it to the rear, so no stoppies, unless you pull that 15 amp fuse I was talking about before. As if you're thinking, well, I'll just delete this, that's something I did on my 300L, you're gonna have some issues with that. The speedometer is read off of this, and if you rip this module out, I'm also pretty sure it's gonna throw all kinds of check engine lights. Probably gonna have to leave this in place. You could always just bypass it, some steel braided lines straight from the master, just run it up and down directly to the brakes, similar to the rear, cap this off, your pump here, and just leave the system in place. It's obnoxious because it's weight and it's just here doing nothing. I don't love that. One of the other things I will say it's kind of annoying about too is they ran rubber braided lines on everything. And I can tell you, you can feel every one of these, and you can grab the brake, even on this brand new brake line, and I can feel it pulse everywhere I touch. That pulse sucks because that's just you eating up your sort of brake power right there. If they at least had done steel braided everywhere, that would have been super reduced, and I wouldn't feel as bad about this unit being here. And to replace these with full steel lines is going to be one heck of a job. I will say the rears, after they come off right here, go into a hard steel line, almost like what you'd see on an automotive, and I don't think it picks back up rubber until it's right here. I think if it was my bike, I would probably leave the unit in place, try to replace everything with steel, and add a switch up here on the handlebars. This switch, which says on off, this is what I'm actually planning on putting on here. Again, if you want to see a video on that, let me know, and I'll show you how to wire this up to have a dead switch for the ABS. Coolant tank is here. It used to be in the rear. I have noticed with the plastic on, with a funnel, you could get down to this. This looks almost just like the old DR-Z throttle assembly and cables, but you probably have heard the new DR-Z is fly-by-wire, and I'm sure they've done that because they wanted to have power modes and traction control, something nobody asked for, but they decided it needed to have. And so fly-by-wire is a really easy way to do that. So why are there cables though? Why isn't it just like a potentiometer or whatever right here, like a lot of bikes run? Where are these going? Well, these cables run down the bike, down the frame, underneath the subframe to this little box right here. And you may be asking yourself, why do we not just simplify all this and put this computer inside of this throttle house? Especially when the throttle body is here. We're going past the throttle body with old school physical cables, so we still have to make sure we have the correct slack in here. We have to oil these occasionally, and most probably we have to pay for these. We could simplify this thing and make it cheaper by just having this built into this. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen, and it pisses me off. And here's the part that really sucks about it. This fly-by-wire system ain't that great. Doesn't give this thing 100% throttle all the time. There's been tuners that have kind of dug into the tuning on that and seen that, and they've already made fixes for it. It also just feels weird. You can tell this is a fly-by-wire bike. It feels sort of delayed to me. I'm not sure that it's actually slow, but I just know that your right hand is not always doing what that throttle body's doing. And I think bikes like my old WR450, my Sherco 500, those are fuel-injected bikes with direct cable-driven. Even my MT-07 there has got cable-driven. Cable-driven throttles on fuel injection are so much better. You notice them right away. Now, you could get used to this system. It could have been a lot better if it didn't have this. If it just had these cables going right into that box. Just thinking, well, can you do that? No, we kind of played with it. We pulled the side off. Behind this cover right here is a bunch of gears and stuff. There's not going to be some simple way to convert this to a normal cable drive. What we have to hope is that the tuners can work some magic with this and make the system work better. If I did own this bike, I'd be getting the throttle assembly off of another Suzuki with just direct fly-by-wire in this and trying to wire it to this big old connector right here. Speaking of reflashing the ECU, this is the ECU, and I'll show you how to get it out real quick. 2 Phillips, or I think those are 10 mils right here. The good thing from what I've seen so far is I think the tuners for around the $300-400 mark can reflash these, and they have gotten really good results out of them. I believe one of the tuners, they did a full exhaust, removed the snorkel, removed the door, tuned it, and got 42 wheel horsepower out of this bike. And that is very impressive. You do have a couple little plastic pins right here. You just get a little pick tool, you can pull these out. With the old DR-Zs, you pretty much had to replace the carburetor, if you had an S or SM model, with the carb that came on the E models, a flat slide pumper. And to get a genuine one of those, you were looking at close to $1,000 these days for that setup. So the fact that I've seen tuners are doing these for under $400, that's really cool, because that's kind of the equivalent there. So you pop this big thing up and you have to use a little pick tool to kind of push that in. Yep, you push this in and you can, if there's a little spot right here, there's even an arrow pointing to it. You kind of push in on that just a little. It lets me open the door. And that is your computer. That's the thing you're going to be melting off. All the air on this bike has to go around this thing into this little snorkel right here. And boy, that's pretty small right there. You got these 2 little passages. Again, I've already seen where a lot of people remove these. One thing I will say be mindful of if you think you're going to rip this out is that any water that travels down this fender, which it will do anytime it gets wet, will come into here, and it should keep running down, but if there's a big splash of it, it can hit and kind of run up onto here. Now right now with the snorkel in, we have kind of a gutter. Pull this out and you're losing that. Just remove the door and just leave this in place. I don't see, once the door's removed, having this also removed being that big of a difference. Also, while you're back here, you see things like you have a trip sensor now. The old one didn't have that. This red cable right here is your OBD2 port. One of the other sort of interesting things to note in here is this section of the subframe is cast, and that's up to about here. So there's a section, sort of a big triangle section that these tubes go into. It's a big sort of cast piece. As well as there's a bridge across here. The welds on all those points too are kind of interesting. They're very gray. I don't know if that's just a thing of welding cast to non-cast. I always thought that didn't work well, but I don't think Suzuki's lost their mind. Of course, they might have, I don't know. But that is interesting. I do have to imagine this is going to be a pretty significantly strong subframe though. Probably a lot of people out there that are going to be throwing luggage on these things, turning these into little baby adventure bikes. And look at our giant two-stroke pipe on here. Isn't that cool? Did you know there's a two-stroke now? No, this is an expansion chamber for power, right? Nope, it's your catalytic converter. You knew that. Something we knew we were gonna get with the new DR-Z. One of the things I think that's really interesting is this thing is all stainless. The old DR-Z had one of those black pot metal style pipes. My 300L came with one of those. They're cheap and ugly. They're a placeholder till you put real exhaust on your bike. And I think it's funny that now the DR-Z has a cat here and in the rear part of the muffler. Now they decided to go to stainless steel. It honestly looks like a nice system. It's just, you're gonna replace it. This would have been the time to put a cheap black pot metal looking exhaust on it, and we'll just replace it. This bike is $9 grand after all, and you just see little things here and there, you go, well, they didn't have to do it like that. I'm not a huge fan of how this big heat shield on the exhaust looks, but functionally it's great. It doesn't get too hot at all. And if you've owned a DR-Z and spent much time up close to the engine, you'll see that this looks remarkably similar to the old one. The shifter here is nice and smooth and rounded on the back sides, and I know the same thing with the brake. I know there was issues on the old ones where these would pierce the cases. Of course, the big thing here is we have a spark plug on this side now. The new thing with the DR-Zs is they're now dual spark. This is a single coil with 2 outputs on it. Yeah, look at that. Spark plug there on the side of the engine. And back on this side of the engine, and things really look the same as the old DR-Z. I did an oil change on this, and like everything is the same on this. This cover does look different, and I don't think you're gonna have issues with this piercing the case. It's definitely more busy than the old DR-Z, which you're gonna get with EFI, of course. But again, a lot of it's still the same as the old DR-Z. Seems to me, and I'm not saying they're wrong for this, but it seems like they kind of took the old design and said, what's the cheapest route to redoing this? And there is a lot they had to redo, but a lot of it is still the same. They were able to base this on the same geometry, a ton of the same parts. I just wish the price reflected that more. $9 grand, this thing is a chunk of change. I mean, you really would think you're getting a whole new bike for that. If there's anything I didn't answer in this video or something you're curious about, be sure to ask. You can jump in my Discord and go into voice chats. I'm in there all the time, and you can hang out with me in there. In fact, if you join my Discord, you can actually just call my phone and ask me all kinds of questions about this thing. If you call me in Discord, it will literally ring my phone. People do it every once in a while. They're usually stuck. They're usually working on something. I have a question. I don't care. That's fine. To join my Discord, though, you do have to join my Patreon. Ah, there it is. There's the sales pitch. But it's just $1 a month, and that gives you early access to these videos. A number of these videos are extended ad-free, and it helps support me. And if you are interested in winning this bike, don't worry. We'll put it back together. Oh, God, what have I done? Yeah, be sure to do that. And, yeah. Otherwise, we will see you next time.